I'm calling today's talk Wise Speech in Challenging Times because if there's anything we can all agree on, it's pretty fraught out there right now. There's so much going on, and there's so much, seems like there's so much yelling and screaming. Even in writing, it's like all caps all the time. And there's a point where I know I've gotten to a place of saying, how do I say what I want to say? How do I have conversations with other people? How do we have difficult conversations with other people? How do we express our opinions on what's going on in the world? And even because it seems that what happens, and this is, I think, very common, people get into very specific views. There are these rigid views. There are rigid points and places that people land for various reasons, because of conditioning, because of their experiences, for anything. Even people who, for the most part, agree with each other, if they're talking about something, then they even yell at each other, well, you're not saying it the right way, or you didn't talk about this. And so there's all this attacking. It seems like there's this you know it seems like a landmine at times. It's like, how can I talk, how can I say anything? And people feel unsafe, to a certain extent. Uh, People feel very unsafe right now in many ways, for many reasons. There's a lot of hatred, a lot of bias, a lot of ism that's been underground for a long time. That is on the surface. I'm in a group, an advisory board, and we're putting on are going to have a panel on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And one of the women, who's Muslim, said, she goes, some people don't even think Islamophobia is a thing. So it's not even just pointing out what it's like, but saying, yeah, it actually exists. So there's these broad expanses of spectrum of views. And how do we have those challenging conversations? And because we tend to be trapped in these, especially because of social media, but also because of how media is fed to us, not even just social media, but the things we read, the things we watch on TV, the radio, or the podcasts we listen to. We tend to listen to what we like, and then we get fed more of those things. So we're only hearing particular points of view or particular stories, and so we're quite siloed in how we view the world oftentimes. And we have to actively seek out other points of view. And so how to show up in this world, how to have difficult conversations, how to not feel that we shouldn't say or can't say what needs to be said. I was talking about all the isms that are up. I mean, it's just not just anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, but racism and homophobia, and it's women's rights are being eroded. And we're just talking about the United States. We're not even talking about the rest of the world. This stuff is up and in our faces, and it's so easy to fall into this place of us and them and dehumanizing the other people, because it's they. How often do you talk about they? They are doing this, and it's their fault. And if they, it's very easy to kind of group people who are in disagreement with us in particular, into a box, so that we don't have to think about it. We can just say, that's the problem right there. And that is a very dangerous thing. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And that's a lot of where we are right now in our country, and in a lot of the countries around the world. It's them. And so there has to be a willingness, there has to be the courage to have conversations, to talk across these divides, these differences. I was reading a book a few weeks ago. I can't remember the title of it. I think it was called How We Get Free. It's the Combahee River Collective, which was a group of Black women in the early 70s who wrote this, I don't want to say manifesto, but they wrote this statement. And it was the 50th anniversary or the 40th anniversary of this, I think the 50th anniversary of this statement, and they published it and had interviews with the women who were involved in this, and it was working towards women's rights and civil rights, and it was a lot of it came out of the anti-war movement, and a lot of the women were talking about, we formed coalitions to get the work done. We didn't necessarily agree on every single point in the whole world, but we agreed on this and we worked together to change the world and make it a better place. And I think that is what's missing right now. We don't know how to have those conversations with each other. And I was listening to this very wise woman, Rabbi Sharon Bruce, Brous, from ICAR, IKAR. I can't remember what it stands for, but she's a rabbi here in Los Angeles. And she talks about this problem that we have. We are right to be concerned about justice, and we are all right to be concerned about safety. But we have to remember that our justice and our safety is tied up with everyone else's. It's not just us versus them. It's like all of us are safe or none of us are safe. And she said the extreme voices on either side are not the ones that are going to lead us to any peace. Those are the extremities I always say fundamentalism in anything is not good, because fundamentalism tends to be rigid and tends to only see one particular point of view, and it's their way or the highway. And that doesn't solve anything. And so we have to recognize that that can be energizing, but it's also very toxic, especially in the long run. And we can't build any kind of future with these extremities. We have to recognize that everyone deserves to live in peace. And the grown-up voice, she said, the grown-up voice in the room is the one that says, stop, listen, and recognize that that the annihilation of anyone is the annihilation of everyone. It's not the answer. We have to work towards safety and justice for all. And this is where I think the Buddha's teachings are so profound, because I think about when I heard her say that, or as I reflect on what she's saying, it reminds me of the Metta Sutta, where it talks about all wishing well for all beings, omitting none. It's an unconditional practice of friendliness, of compassion, of kindness. And it's how we're supposed to move through the world, And I was in a meeting the other day, and we were talking about how our faith traditions offer us the moral foundation to give us this place to stay centered, to see our shared humanity. So these teachings of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, is this way to move through the world, to move towards freedom, but not just for ourselves, but for all, and how to live in harmony with others. Live in a way that's wise and skillful, that does what's right, that takes accountability for its actions, but is not causing harm. That's such a foundational teaching, not to intentionally kill or cause harm. And, I was reminded about wise speech, which is part of the Eightfold Path. The Buddhists thought it was so important. It has its own factor. There's wise view, wise intention, wise action, wise speech, wise livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, or collectedness of mind. So that is the whole Eightfold Path. And this one section of it, it's divided into 3 sections. One of the sections is ethical behavior, sila. And wise speech is in sila. And it's not just wise speech, it's wise communication. We have so many forms of communication today, written, verbal, in person, not in person, all the media. How do we communicate wisely? So I'll say wise speech, but I mean the whole ball of communication. Um, and so I've been thinking about that this week. I was talking about it when I was teaching this week, and I had a conversation with someone who thought something I said was very hurtful and unskillful and was not wise speech. And so I really wanted to reflect on that as well. And it's like, could I have said what I said differently? And I probably could have and said the same thing. So it's not being true to what I believe, but I could have said it differently. And so I want to talk about the Buddhist teachings and wise speech and how important they are and how we can utilize them in our lives today. And there's a wonderful book. Well, there's a couple of books. Bhikkhu Bodhi has The Noble Eightfold Path, which is just, it's a classic. And he just talks about the different factors of the Eightfold Path. But Gregory Kramer, Kramer, has a book called A Whole Life Path. And it's the Eightfold Path basically for people like you and me who live in the world, not monastics, but householders. And for today, how do we utilize the Eightfold Path in our lives? And so that's a really good book. And in there, he talks about, he said that speech in itself conditions the mind. Once we say something, then it also conditions how we see things. And he said, this is really important. Once unleashed in the world, it conditions the minds of others. So it's important to be cautious, and once we let it go, it's gone. And it's potent, whether it's written, it's imagery, videos, whatever it is, we have to be really cautious of what we're unleashing in the mind. It's like I was talking with a friend of mine about how we say things. Somebody will come up to us as teachers and say, "Oh, you said that thing like 10 years ago, and it was so helpful to me." And they'll repeat back what you said, and you're like, "I have absolutely no recollection of saying that. It sounds good. I can't believe those wise words came out of my mouth." But we may not remember it, but other people remember what we say. So to really be cautious and to be mindful about it. And it really is mindfulness that underlies wise speech. Right view, seeing where things are stuck in greed, hatred, and delusion or not, and then to make the effort to move forward wisely and cautiously. And so there's the sutta talks about, of course, what's not wise speech, which is speech that's false speech, divisive, abusive, or idle chatter, gossipy kinds of stuff. And then wise speech is you say it at the right time, it's true, it's gentle, you say it gently, and it's necessary, and it's spoken in friendliness. There's an underlying intention that's friendly and kind. Because we can be true and timely and gentle in the words, but our underlying intention can be manipulative or selfish. So really having this full package is really important. So yeah. So basic for talking about what's not wise speech, false speech, which is kind of basic if you think about it. Don't lie. But the Buddha said to Rahula, his son, he said, when we are not ashamed to tell a deliberate lie, there is no evil one would not do. He thought that truthfulness was so important. It's kind of like the front of that slippery slope. If we can just start telling lies, then it's going to be easy for us to move down that path of dishonesty, and which very often ends up causing harm. So this truthfulness, this integrity in speech is so important. When I would have people that I would work with or work for, or they'd ask what a quality I would want in someone I worked with, I would always say integrity. It's so important, the sila, but the integrity and wise speech. How can you trust this person's words? Can you trust this person? I think it was Ruth King. Yeah, it was Ruth King, wasn't I think. It was Ruth King many years ago on a retreat. I sat with her and she said her intention in her life is to make it safe for people to be around her. So to have this quality of truthfulness is so important. Um, and divisive speech. We all know, just open your window and you'll hear people screaming at each other. That's probably not necessarily true, but it's so everywhere, go to Facebook, go to Instagram, go to the newspaper, go to the interwebs. You'll see this. It's so, there's so much of name calling. It's become a thing. It's become normalized in our speech, and it's fans the flames of division. This us and them. There's racial hatred and class division and economic injustice and Palestinians and Israelis and Jews and all the horror in the rest of the world as well. There's the Sudan and the Congo and Ukraine and all the stuff that's caused by, and the shit talk that goes back and forth, the trash talk. It's just how we move through the world. And so to really be cautious about that. Um, and the opposite of that is speech that promotes friendship and harmony and comes from this place of metta, this loving kindness and compassion. As I mentioned before, this willingness to be civil to each other. If civil is the bottom line, go for civil. Let that bar be low. Doesn't have to be high. We start where we are. But be kind, promote friendliness and harmony as best you can. And then harsh speech is uttered in anger. That's the abusive, that's the scolding, that's the place that comes from animosity, insults. Its main root is aversion and anger, it's got this it can cause a lot of pain. It can cause a lot of harm. You see it over and over and over. The bullying in schools, it causes a lot of damage. It's like, oh, it's just words. It's like, we can't be dismissive. We have to understand it. We have to understand it, that it is harmful. And then even this is something I always try and remember to say, even to ourselves, we have to be cautious about how we talk to ourselves in our stories. What stories do we tell ourselves? That narrative that's running in the background. What kind of names do we call ourselves? Can you be kind instead? I was talking to a friend today. She's like, oh my God, the stories. I go, yeah, there's those too. We kind of dismiss them because they're always there, but we have to begin to pay attention. Again, that mindfulness. So even in jest, because I grew up so sarcastic, but even in jest, we think, oh, I'm just joking. It doesn't hurt anyone. And it's like, yeah, it does. It does. So bring yourself back. And then the idle chatter. There's a sutta where the Buddha lists all the things you're not supposed to talk about, which is basically everything except the Dharma. But Kramer, I love this. He says, we are bombarded by idle chatter, which dulls and distracts the mind, and discernment is lost. There's so much idle. There's so much just blah, 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 blah stuff. And sometimes it's fun just to check out. It's fun just to watch a silly movie or a TV show or read a silly book, because the mind needs that rest, but not as a constant diet of distraction. You have to really, that's because discernment is gone. So we have to watch that, or the gossiping, because that can lead to harm. So what do we do? How do we show up in the world? The Buddha gave us these 5 invitations before you speak. Is this the right time to say what I need to say? Sometimes it can wait. Sometimes this is the time, especially if we see a harm being caused and we need to say, hey, stop that, or knock it off, or put a stop to something right away. Is it true? You know, is it true? Is it gentle? How are we saying it? We can say it's something at the right time, and that's true, but be really nasty in how we say it. Can we say it kindly? Is it necessary? That's huge. You know, I say this a lot, but how many times have I seen something on social media and my fingers just kind of go over the keyboard and then I went, is this necessary? Yeah, most of the time it's not. It's just, social media distraction. And so I just back off. I don't need to get involved. I don't need to jump in. I don't need to make it personal. I could just let it go. Um, you know, and then, uh, and it's the necessary is the opposite of idle chatter, because idle chatter is not really necessary. You know, it's the heart of wholesome engagement when it's necessary. And Kramer says it's the heart of wholesome engagement. It's harmonious. And then what's the underlying intention of what you need to say? Is it kind? Is it considerate? Is it compassionate? Is it wise? So again, there's this wisdom and compassion that should underlie. That's the moral fabric and foundation that should underlie how we show up in the world, how we speak to others. It's so important. And what's really important to recognize, and this is where people get very confused in Buddhist teachings, saying difficult things does not equal causing harm. Telling someone that they are causing harm is not wise speech. It's oftentimes you go, oh, I can't say that. It's not nice. It's not a nice thing. They won't like it. They don't have to like it. If it's true and if it's necessary and if it's the right time and you're coming from a place of kindness and it needs to be said. For me, the practice of wise speech has been mostly A, losing my sarcasm, but B, saying what needs to be said. It's so easy to sit back and not say anything because that's a lot safer. It's so much safer. My background, my conditioning is it's safer just not to say a thing. But that is not wise. For me, it's been a journey of saying things to people that I needed to say things to. Because if you don't, you can let harm continue. If you see harm being done and you don't say anything, are you complicit? I don't know. That's the reflection you have in the moment or later. Unwelcome feedback. You have to give somebody feedback that they may not like to hear, that they're not doing their job correctly. But, in a work environment, you have to tell people when they're not performing. You're not doing them any favors if you don't. So that whole thing of saying the difficult things, but say it kindly at the right time with the wise intention, you know? And when we say it gently, it makes it easier for challenging things to be heard. If you're yelling at someone, it's like really easy to shut down. But if you're showing up in a loving, kind way, it makes that a little bit more palatable. So and then, there's the whole world of nonviolent communication, which I really don't know that much about. And it's one of the things I want to connect with. There's a teacher, Oren J. Sofer, he teaches at Spirit Rock a lot. And I know he's done a lot of work in nonviolent communication. And I think that's a way that we can help to utilize wise speech. Excuse me. So I am really working right now with wise speech and how I show up for primarily the conversation around Palestine and Israel. It's so fraught. It's so challenging. but it's something I feel really compelled that I need to talk about. And so how do I show up wisely and kindly? I'm in amongst many people of many different persuasions or points of view, and navigating that is challenging in different organizations I belong to. And so I am so grateful for wise speech. I know I'll have to say things that absolutely terrify me, but if I'm committed to this practice and this path, I get to do that. So, um, I think, I think, oh, yeah, oh, a couple other things. And so we use mindfulness. We have to pay attention. It's so easy just to have things slip out of our mouth. So paying attention, seeing clearly what we're saying, what's appropriate. Listen also. We have to listen to others. We can't just blather on without allowing the other person to speak. That's communication. Otherwise, we're just speechifying. So deep listening, listening from the heart without interrupting, letting the other person talk. It's huge. What a gift that is. How often does that happen in our society? We're all waiting for that person to take a breath so we can jump in and tell them what we want to tell. And I'm a jumper inner. I finish your sentences for you, so I apologize in the future if I do that. But that's something I really need to be more aware of, to just pause and listen, and investigate our biases and our fears. How are we skewed? What's our conditioning? How did we grow up? Um, saying, and yeah, and I saw something today. I saw something yesterday, which I thought was really great, and it's from Sacred Mountain Sangha, and it said, "May we know ourselves as collective, each other, interdependent and sacred." May we know that we're all each other, interdependent and sacred. And that goes back to what Rabbi Sharon said, as our safety and our justice and our safety is tied up with everyone else's safety. And what did Fannie Lou Hamer say? No one's free until everyone's free. It's true. So if we're working for our freedom and for our benefit, it doesn't do us any good unless we're doing it for everyone, all beings. That's the ultimate. Until we recognize that, we're going to be creating these little rigid categories of you have to be this and you have to fit into that and you can't say this and you're not allowed to say that. I saw something the other day that I thought was brilliant. The way things are happening now in the United States and all these laws that are being passed that you can't do this and you can't do that. April 15th is always celebrated as the day that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball. He was the first Black professional baseball player. So everybody celebrates that, but in some places you're not allowed to talk about what that barrier was that he broke. That's how insane it is. So how do we navigate this with this intention to be wise and to be skillful and say what needs to be said, to be kind, and not to fall into the easy practices of just cut and dried, rigid, because it's easier. Invite you to investigate this for yourself, where you can show up wisely and skillfully and without causing harm. But ending injustice where we see it, seeing what's not working, seeing what's broken, seeing what's causing harm, seeing what's driven by greed and hatred and ignorance, and working for justice, and non-harming and kindness and the well-being of all. So thank you so much, my friends, for your attention. This is something that I think we really need to reflect on and bring into our lives and share with others. So thank you.